Lesson 18. In this last lesson of the book, we'll cover some drafts for a variety of features and use suppression and also create some text extrusions. I'll go over here and I'm going to just simply open up the part that's already been created. And we're going to walk back through the part by doing the model player, using the model player. So we're going to roll it back to the very beginning and take a look at the features as they were created. And of course you have the default features and you have your first extrusion, first solid feature. Now in this case here we use the capability where we put the taper into the first extrusion instead of adding a draft. You put a taper on, then you can't use draft. So you can't put a draft on top of a draft, you can't put a round on top of a round. So just understand, if you put a taper on here, this is what you're going to be using for your draft. And we have our thickness, and we actually have a varying thickness this time. So the walls are one thickness and the bottom piece inside here, this is going to be 0.250. So you have a shell with one command but two different thicknesses. So this is the non-default thickness. Next we're going to offset a datum plane. And do a sketch. Sketch is important here, that we take the correct references. You're going to be using the inside in referencing. We have the draft. Each feature has its own draft. And we're going to put this small cylindrical pedestal in here. Now you want to be careful with your dimensions, because if they're not correct, the component features here will be a little bit too close to the end, the edge where these two are, and if that happens you might get a failure when you put your rounds in there. We also have an automatic gap created when we're doing this, and later when we do our round, we'll do surface to surface round and it'll fill in that gap. You can see it here. Put a draft onto the cylinder, put a hole, and then put a draft onto the hole. And we put a round in, one round, but it has different dimensions. So it's two sets in this case. And we're going to mirror the group geometry. Plays it back a little bit odd, but it doesn't play it back as a complete group. But this has been grouped on one side here, all one unit, and then we're just going to simply mirror it. If you don't get your dimensions correct, it won't mirror all the features, and you'll get some failures with your rounds over on this side. So you want to watch your dimension. The scheme and the sizes are very important, and they have to be precise. And next, of course, we're going to have the same thing happen for the mirror in the other direction. So basically we create all the geometry over here: pedestal, cylinder, the drafts, the rounds, the hole with a draft. We group them together and then we mirror them about the plane here. Then we take both of these together and make a group, and we mirror them about this plane. So you get a lot accomplished at one time. And we're round. That round is very interesting. It's one command, and we're picking two surfaces. So we're selecting the surface here and the top of the pedestal, those two, and it will actually put a round about the whole object, kind of like, almost like it welds it. Next we put a datum plane in, and the datum plane was just to create a section so we could see a section on the part. And we have our text. We made the text quite thick. Normally it would be much smaller if it was a casting, die cast or plastic casting molded. And that's the model player. And we'll go back over to our standard orientation. All right, so we have the model here. Let's make sure you understand that I've already set up my model tree items, so I've turned everything on. You want to remember to do that. I did change the color a little bit. You can add whatever color you want when you're doing it. And what we're going to do is we'll start off with our first feature, and we'll roll the model back to the extrude and simply go through the steps by looking at what's previously been completed. So here we have a section, and of course in this particular case you want to make it symmetric, so you need center lines, construction center lines in both directions. Put them in, put a rectangle in, and then add your rounds, and then use symmetric. This is very important. Use the symmetric after the rounds are in there. And actually maybe you should even make equal, use equal, and make each one of these equal to each other. Therefore you only have one dimension. So you should have 2 dimensions for the size and 1 for the radius. Then you go to symmetric and you hit your center line, and I like to use not the end point here for the tangency, but the center point for the round. And you can see we made the tangency, the symmetry in both directions. The tangency is shown on the outside here for the radiuses when you put in a fillet. So those are automated. That's why you don't use an arc, you always use a fillet. Now, one of the things we did is we used the capability of adding a taper. Those of you who have seen Pro Engineer or used Pro Engineer in the past, the taper was not available, so it is on the Creo software. Now, next thing is we shelled it, and with the shell, the main thing to understand is that we actually have 2 thicknesses. So in the references here, we removed the first surface, and then we went to the non-default surface. So we can just go back through that one very easily. So model, let's go to the shell, click on this surface to remove, and you can right mouse button and choose non-default thickness, or you can get that up here by clicking inside this field. We're going to go and pick this bottom portion here, and this is where you want this to be different. So let's just make it very different in our case, and we'll see the thickness here now. And I'm going to go over to the view here. I'm going to see whether or not there's something we want to use. Just go to visibilities, and I'm going to pull the model back, pull the clipping plane back. You can see you can rotate the part through the clipping plane. But the main thing here is that you see that we do have a difference in thicknesses. That's on the View tab. I also turned on all the datum tags so that we can see the names to the datums. I'm going to go back over to the model, and I'm going to delete that feature and instead just roll the model back. Actually roll it forward in this case. So we have our shell. Next thing is we actually took and just simply offset a datum plane. So you click on the front, pick datum plane, and we offset a datum plane. Now the reason for doing that is we need a datum plane for the pedestal. We want it to go up to a certain position. If we sketch for the little pedestal we're going to make, and we sketch on this surface and we project it up, then it won't have the dimension we want. We want the dimension to come from the very bottom. So by offsetting a datum plane, we can create that protrusion, that extruded pedestal, and it can go up to this datum. Therefore, the dimension is available when we get to the drawing. Here's the dimension, 0.75. Now next we have our full group here, and we're going to have to do this a little bit different. So it's all been done. And it won't let me roll back any of these. Let's see if I can do it this way. I'm going to control, I'm going to use shift and then pick all of these items, and let's see if we suppress them, see what happens. Now it wants to suppress the whole group. That's kind of interesting. I'll do it that way. So here's my pedestal. I can just take, in this particular case, each feature and we can go back over it. We have our extrude. We'll edit the definition of it. The main thing here when you're creating this is that you pick the correct surface to sketch on. You will notice that it's not on the bottom of the part. It's not on the datum plane. It's actually on the inner face of that shell. So this surface here is what you want to make sure you're choosing. We'll edit the internal sketch and go into the sketch view. Now, I think I'll turn the sketch so that it looks a little bit more like the book. Not turning it for some reason. That's interesting. Not sure why. I wanted to turn the view. Doesn't want to do it for me. Well, regardless, let's take a look at what we did. We'll do it in pictorial. Maybe it's easier to see anyway. When you first put this in, it's going to give you a certain type of dimensioning scheme. You're going to have some weak dimensions. So let me take it out. Most important thing here is your references. Doesn't want me to do this right now. It's okay. So you have your references here around the edge. I want to cancel this out and go back into it. I want to see those references a little bit better. So you're using the edge. You can do that by creating it with a offset or using the edge itself. Okay. You got thicken, you got project. The other thing you can do is you can actually go into your references and you can select these edges as references before you do your sketch. And maybe we'll do it on this side here just to show. Again, you can use edge, but this actually I think works better. Yeah, it won't allow me to do it. What's happening is we've got a lot of other geometry that we created, and it's referencing this information. So in order for me to do this at all, I can't use this pedestal information. I have to suppress it and do it from scratch. That's no big deal. So you can actually turn off your datum features if you want at this point, just so that it's a little bit cleaner when you're doing your sketch. So we're going to extrude. We're going to click on this inner face here for our sketching plane. I'll go to the sketch view. And in this particular case, if I right mouse button and reference, I can select this geometry here. Now, if you don't get the edge itself, you can click on your right mouse button until you get the edge. So now I've got these as my reference. Now, I could have also used loop here and not used any offset at all. Another method. But one of the things we can do is we can actually just put the geometry in, and when we do that, it'll paint over the top. Now, it's a little bit different than was in the book, which is part of what I want to do here. It's going to lock in, and you're going to see there's my arc. There's no dimensions. And then my line, vertical, horizontal. Oh, I need one more line. I got to close it up. I want this to be a shaded feature here. So in this case here, you see we use these edges as references, and then we did put the geometry in and locked it in. Check. Let's project up. And in this case here, that's why we want this datum plane, because we want to go up to it. So, 2 selected, and we want to select the datum plane. That'll control the height of it. Now, what happens is, on that particular feature, if we edit it, we'll see we've got a dimension here, we got a dimension here, and if we go to the datum plane and we have that dimension, these will all show up on the drawing as displayed dimensions, driving dimensions. So if I change this to 0.9, let's say, you'll see it raised the top of the pedestal. So wherever that goes to. I don't think it'll do it on the bottom. All right. Go back over to our item. Want to make sure I didn't do something wrong here as far as what I'm adding. See, I left this in here, so I've got to delete out that particular feature I created before I resume this. So the first feature in this group, it actually has the round in here, which I didn't put in with. But the main thing is, when you're creating that feature, it's going to give you weak dimensions. It won't give you the dimensioning scheme that you want. Follow the steps in the book. The steps will lead you through this, even though you may think something is not quite right. You have to do the steps, because the steps are going to show that you're going to have a chance to edit it later. So when you put this in, you're going to see you've got this kind of a different dimensioning scheme than what's in the drawings of the book. When you're finished with that, you're going to actually go and change it. So here we're going to put in the pedestal, we're going to put in the other stuff, and then here down, get pretty far down, you're actually going to go and change the dimensioning scheme and then the sizes, but it's after you put in the cylinder. So follow the steps, even though they don't look like the drawing in the beginning of the of the lesson. The dimensions are going to be a little bit different. The sketch view, and you have your geometry with the new dimensioning scheme, because this has been finished, this particular feature. So the next feature that you want to put in there is the draft. And make sure you're picking the correct references. You've got the surface to be drafted, which is fairly obvious. This one, you only pick one, and it's tangent. And then the hinge. So the hinge, it says datum plane. So you want to make sure you're using the datum plane as the hinge. And this is the datum plane on the very bottom, the front datum plane. Otherwise, if you rotate the wall, draft it, using the inside face here, it's going to look different, and it's going to give you different sizes. So be a little bit careful with that when you're choosing it. You're actually choosing the front datum plane as your draft hinge. Now with the hole, the only thing, I mean the cylinder, the only thing to be concerned with here is making sure that you're placing it correctly. So you've got the right dimensions on here. If you don't, the distance between here and the wall will be different, and it may fail when you try to put the rounds in. Okay, the draft is very simple, but again, paying attention to what you're selecting when you're drafting. You have the draft surfaces, which is of course the tangent cylinder face, and then you have the draft hinge. A lot of people make a mistake and pick this down here as the draft hinge. It's the top we're drafting this time. We're rotating from. The angle is taken from the top, not from down here. We'll give you a completely different look if you do it the other way. Hole, nothing special about the hole, but you do want to be aware that we're going up to a surface, and the surface we're going to, here you got the axes and you've got the starting surface, which is in the top, but the ending surface is the plane right here. So you want this upper portion here, the hole, not to penetrate beyond that. You're drafting the hole, be careful, pay a lot of attention to the way it's told to do it. You're told to do it, because drafting from one end or another was going to make a difference. A very small draft on this. But pay attention to what the book says. And last, of course, we have the round. And the round is composed of multiple sets. You've got the first set and the second set, which has just this in. So they're different sizes. Allows us to have one feature but vary the sizes. So these two edges, you can see them in highlighted color here, were selected. The size of your rounds is again important. Look at how close these rounds come to each other. If you make these incorrect, like all this size, they will intersect. Sometimes it fails, sometimes it doesn't. But it also affects the way it looks around the edge. So as far as the mirror goes, basically what we did is we just took all these items and we grouped them. And you can change the name by picking slowly on the name and then type in a new name, or renaming them with your right mouse button choice. But once they're a group, then what you're going to do is you're going to want to select them, select the group itself, and go to the mirror tool. Mirror tool doesn't become active unless something is selected. Now it's available. And if your dimensions are right, it'll mirror everything over. If you get a failure, it means some of your dimensions are wrong. And going in the other direction, I'm back this completely out. I'm a little worried I'm getting a lot of stuff here, legacy stuff. And we'll go back up to our mirror. You can see the group has been copied and then selected on both of those. So edit definition using the top datum plane. So both of these items have been picked and then mirrored to the other side. Again, you might get failures if your dimensions are a little wrong. You might have a problem with the space in here. So check your dimensions again before you say that there's something wrong. So you do all the work for one, you group it, mirror it, take the two and mirror it again. So it's fairly easy to accomplish a lot. Now, I think I'll suppress this one. Basically what we're doing now is you're going to take and put in a round, and maybe we'll turn off our datum features to unclutter the view. And in this case, you can select the round first, and you're going to pick the surface, not the edge. Remember, there's no edge here. See the gap? Hold down the control key and pick the other one. And it should preview all the way around. If it doesn't, again, your dimensions are slightly off. Go back and check every feature. Now, you probably notice on mine, you see these edges here. I set this up with the options. Model display. Show small surfaces. Shade very small surfaces. Let's see if that changes anything. Let's try turning off the edges. That's probably the more important one. So we have the entity display. And find where I would turn that off. I don't see the choice. I've got my quality set very high on this also. I was hoping to be able to turn that off so that we didn't have to look at the edge of the surfaces, but I don't see the setting here. Shade with edges, I'm sorry. Previously, you could actually turn off those edges, and let's see what happens. Let's just put on shading. Of course, we could have done that in the other one too. Ah, there we did. Okay, so this has actually been added in from Wildfire to Creo, shading with edges. That wasn't there before. Previously, you had to go to your settings in the environment or in the config ops in order to get that. You know, you'd go to view, and then you'd have model display, and it would show up. Now, the reason why it's nice to do is because if you actually have a surface in there instead of a solid, it will let you know. In this case here, if you go and you shading with edges, it looks like it's correct, but how would you know? Let's go over here, cutting a section through the whole thing, that's one way to see whether or not it's solid in there. So we've got a couple of sections that have been created already, and let's set these as active, and we'll see that this is all solid inside. I think I'll leave that as active. So that particular round, let's edit the definition of that again. There is a different option here. You got sets, transitions, pieces, options, and here surface. What if you wanted to create a surface round? Well, what would that mean? So we'll select surface. See what it looks like. So now you can see the surface has been put in there, but there's actually a hole because its surface does not have any thickness, no volume. So all the way around it's like that. You got this skin, this surface skin right here, but it's not solidified. And in the book, you're going to have to cut the section anyway so that you can see what's going on in there. let's pick on that round and see if there's anything we can do. Let's see. Let's pick on solidify. And it's got an arrow, so it says I'm going to solidify down from that into the part, not up. Check. See what happens. So if you have difficulty with a round, you can put it in as a surface round and then use solidify, and it'll fill the gaps. In this particular case, it wasn't needed, but in some cases that will work better than just trying to put in the round itself. Let's go all the way back out. So it's very powerful. Put that surface in there and then solidify it. So if you have a difficulty, I mean, look at how close this is. These are right up against each other. And you can test to see whether or not they are going to work. Let's make this one a little bit bigger. And you can see all this fails by making it bigger because it's interfering here. Go back into my standard orientation, repaint, and then let's look for the last feature. Now we're going to put this text in here, this text extrusion. But before we do, and we've been using the suppress a lot, so it's basically doing the same thing, trying to suppress the features that you don't want to have constantly regenerating when you're doing work, so you can clean things up. Now this is a good activity. It makes things go much faster, but this option, you want to make sure your tree filters are on, because if they're not, you don't know that exists. So when you save the part, obviously make sure things are not suppressed, or when you open up a part in this case, make sure you check the tree filters so that they actually show up in the model tree over here. Now this is a simple extrude command. Extrude, but text is what we're using for our sketch. So we have a text option here. You're going to click on it, and it's a little odd. You're going to actually pick a point and then move it in a certain direction. Pick a second point, and that's going to give you your height. And you can see you can change how it is centered. You can change the font. A lot of stuff that you can put it along a curve. Mine's going out here pretty far. So I'll move it in. So it's a little odd. You're picking a point, picking another point, and that's giving your height dimension. You can see you can actually drag it. And then you have your height. Of course, it's the same one as this one here. It's going to be the same height. Now, if you have the flexible modeling, you'll notice at the end of the lesson you do some flexible modeling with this. And that option is not on everybody's system. So depending on whether you have the schools edition, student edition, academic edition, commercial edition, and whether or not your organization paid for the license or if the license came with it. There's also a section in here on doing some more of the lighting. And again, we're going to stop right here because you can spend your time doing some rendering if you wish. Hopefully you'll do it a little bit better than what mine looks like. Not too bad. All right, this concludes lesson 18. Make sure you do the projects that are available on the download page. That's very important. Those projects should be part of your requirements for the class that you're in. On the CAD Resources site, click on the book, and you're going to see that you have the lesson projects download and also here. And of course, if you're in the class, if you purchase the book, you obviously have access to everything else, including the websites necessary for getting other resources. So let's see if I've got these bookmarked. You go into the book and you have the student access free companion here. And you have packages and stuff available. That has changed since I saw it just a few days ago. Let's see what we have on this one. And then the companion site. And you can see from the companion site, you've got all this information. And what you want to make sure you're doing is going into the lessons here. You can download lectures, or obviously the lesson PDFs, which you've had to do to get into the lesson 18 anyway. And then of course you have access to all the lectures. It's easier, by the way, to download these, open them up, and then burn them, and then run them off your computer rather than stream them. This concludes lesson 18.